Good evening, and welcome to Truth Report. I'm Alex Truth, and tonight we're following the money, from your rooftop to the boiler room, from the sewage pipes beneath your feet to a $200 electric bike at Walmart. Every one of these stories connects to the same question: who controls the energy future, and who's getting left behind?
I'm Maya Clarity, and I have to tell you, when we started pulling the threads on tonight's stories, we found something remarkable. A new study says solar panels could add up to $79,000 to your home's value. A startup is going after the fossil fuel industry's last stronghold in commercial heating. And meanwhile, our sewage systems are quietly pumping out far more greenhouse gases than anyone officially admits. These stories aren't separate, they're chapters in the same book.
We've also got a fascinating look at what happens when electric transportation gets democratized, a $200 e-bike from Walmart, and a deep space detector technology that might seem unrelated but actually tells us something critical about where scientific investment is heading. Stick with us, because by the end of this show, you're going to see the pattern.
And that pattern has winners and losers. As always, we're going to name names, follow the money, and ask the questions that the press releases don't want you to think about. So let's get into it.
Let's start with the story that directly hits your wallet. A brand new study has just dropped, and the numbers are eye-popping. Let's go. Electrek is reporting today on a major new study analyzing more than 5,000 home sales across the United States, and the findings are striking. Homes with rooftop solar panels installed sold for between 5 and 10% more than comparable homes without solar. When you do the math on median home prices, that translates to a boost of $39,500 on the low end, up to $79,000 on the high end. That is not a rounding error. That is a second income.
Let's put those numbers in context, because they matter enormously. The average residential solar installation in the U.S. costs somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 before incentives. With the federal investment tax credit still available, that's the 30% credit under the Inflation Reduction Act, many homeowners are paying between $10,000 and $20,000 out of pocket. So if your home value increases by $39,000 to $79,000, we're talking about a return on investment of 2 to 1 at minimum, and potentially 4 to 1 or higher.
And that's before you factor in the electricity savings. The average American household spends about $1,600 a year on electricity. A properly sized solar system can eliminate 70 to 90% of that bill. Over 25 years, the typical warranty period for modern solar panels, that's another $28,000 to $36,000 in savings. Stack that on top of the home value increase, and you're looking at a total economic benefit that could exceed $100,000 on a $20,000 investment.
Now here's where it gets interesting from an investigative standpoint. Who doesn't want you to know this? The answer is the traditional utility monopolies. Every rooftop solar installation is a customer who's generating their own power, reducing demand on the grid during peak hours, and cutting into utility revenue. That's why we've seen aggressive lobbying in states like Florida, Alabama, and Indiana to roll back net metering policies that compensate solar homeowners for excess power they send back to the grid.
Exactly right. And this study gives solar advocates a powerful new weapon in that fight. Because here's the thing, when you increase home values, you increase property tax revenue. Local governments benefit directly from solar adoption. School districts benefit. Fire departments benefit. So the argument that solar is somehow a freeloader on the grid, which is the talking point the utility lobby has been pushing for years, gets completely demolished by data like this.
There's also an equity dimension we need to talk about. That 5 to 10% home value premium is percentage-based, which means it's more valuable in dollar terms for higher-priced homes. A $790,000 home gets a $79,000 boost, but a $200,000 home only gets a $20,000 boost. And who has the hardest time accessing solar? Lower-income homeowners and renters. This study inadvertently highlights the solar wealth gap. The people who need energy savings the most are the least likely to capture this value.
And that connects directly to policy. Community solar programs, which allow renters and lower-income households to subscribe to shared solar installations, exist in some states but are actively blocked in others. The same utility lobbies that fight rooftop net metering also fight community solar. They're not just protecting their business model, they're perpetuating energy inequality. This study of 5,000 home sales should be a wake-up call for every state legislator who's been sitting on community solar legislation.
One more thing on this story. The study looked at actual completed sales, not estimates or projections. This is real market data showing that real buyers are willing to pay a real premium for solar homes. That's the free market speaking. And when the free market says solar adds value, and the utility monopolies say solar is a problem, you have to ask yourself, whose interests are actually being served by anti-solar policy?
The market has spoken. Now let's shift gears dramatically. From a technology that can add tens of thousands to your home value, to one that costs less than your monthly car payment. Maya, tell us about this Walmart e-bike.
Alright, so Electrek's Micah Toll, who is genuinely one of the most respected e-bike journalists in the industry, bought a BroPath electric bike from Walmart for $199. That's not a typo. Under $200 for a battery-powered bicycle. And he did exactly what we would do. He asked the question, how bad could it really be?
Let me frame why this matters beyond the novelty factor. The average new car in the United States now costs over $49,000. The average used car is over $28,000. Gas, insurance, maintenance, the total cost of car ownership runs $12,000 a year for the typical American. An e-bike at $199 isn't just a toy. If it actually works, it represents a radical disruption of personal transportation economics.
And here's the thing, even if this particular bike is rough around the edges, and by all accounts it is a bare-bones machine, the fact that it exists at this price point tells us something important about where the technology curve is heading. 5 years ago, a decent e-bike cost $2,000 minimum. 3 years ago, brands like Electrek started pushing functional e-bikes below $1,000. Now we're under $200. The battery and motor technology has gotten cheap enough that mass-market retailers like Walmart can put an electric bike on their shelves next to the lawn chairs and tube socks.
Now, the investigative question here is about quality and safety. The e-bike industry in the United States is still largely unregulated at the federal level. We've seen horrific battery fires from cheap lithium-ion packs in unregulated e-bikes and e-scooters, particularly in New York City, where fires from budget e-bike batteries have killed dozens of people over the past few years. So when we see a $199 e-bike at Walmart, we need to ask, what corners are being cut to hit that price?
That's the critical question. The battery is typically the most expensive component in an e-bike, often accounting for a third to half of the total cost. A quality battery pack with proper battery management systems and UL certification can cost a manufacturer $100 to $200 alone. If the entire retail price is $199, you have to wonder about the margins on safety components. Walmart does have product liability exposure here, which provides some backstop. They're not going to sell something that regularly catches fire, but the long-term durability and safety testing on ultra-budget products is always a concern.
And yet, and this is the tension, we can't let perfect be the enemy of good when it comes to transportation equity. There are millions of Americans who can't afford a car, who live in areas with poor public transit, who are one vehicle breakdown away from losing their job. For those people, a $200 e-bike that gets them to work is transformative, even if it's not going to win any design awards.
The broader pattern here is what economists call democratization of technology. We saw it with computers, with smartphones, with solar panels. The technology starts expensive and exclusive, then gets cheaper until it's accessible to nearly everyone. E-bikes are on that same curve. And the policy implication is enormous. Cities that invest in protected bike infrastructure aren't just serving liquor-clad enthusiasts anymore. They're building transportation networks for people who literally cannot afford any other option.
And let's note who loses in this equation. The auto industry, the oil industry, and the auto insurance industry all have a vested interest in keeping Americans car-dependent. Every commuter who switches to an e-bike is a customer lost 3 times over: no car payment, no gas purchase, no insurance premium. The $200 Walmart e-bike may seem like a curiosity, but it represents a structural threat to some of the most powerful industries in the American economy.
Follow the money, as always. Now, Alex, let's go underground, literally, to a story that exposes a massive blind spot in our climate accounting.
This one comes from Nature, one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world, so let's be clear about the credibility of the source here. The report published on February 24 details findings that wastewater treatment plants and sewage infrastructure are emitting significantly larger amounts of greenhouse gases than previously reported. We're talking about methane and nitrous oxide, both of which are far more potent warming agents than carbon dioxide over a 20-year timeframe.
Let's break down why this matters. Methane has roughly 80 times the warming potential of CO2 over a 20-year period. Nitrous oxide is approximately 270 times more potent. These are not marginal gases. When sewage systems and wastewater treatment tanks are releasing these compounds into the atmosphere and the emissions aren't being properly counted, we have a fundamental problem with our climate accounting. It means our models are wrong. It means our targets may be wrong. It means we're fighting the climate crisis with incomplete information.
And here's the investigative angle that gets my blood pumping. Wastewater infrastructure is managed by municipal utilities, which are overseen by state and federal regulators. These entities have reporting obligations. If emissions are significantly higher than what's being reported, we need to ask, is this incompetence, or is it convenient ignorance? Because there's a massive financial incentive for municipalities to undercount emissions. Higher reported emissions mean higher regulatory burden, more expensive upgrades, and tougher compliance standards.
The Nature reporting makes clear that this isn't a small discrepancy. The actual emissions from sewage systems appear to be substantially larger than what shows up in official inventories. That's a systemic problem. Think about what this means for national emissions pledges under the Paris Agreement. Countries report their emissions based on inventories that include estimates for wastewater treatment. If those estimates are significantly low, then reported national emissions are also low, which means countries that claim to be on track for their climate targets may actually be further behind than they think.
And it's not just the treatment plants themselves. The Nature article points to the broader sewage infrastructure, the pipes, the collection systems, the overflow points. During heavy rain events, many American cities have combined sewer systems that overflow directly into waterways. Those overflow events also release greenhouse gases that are essentially invisible in the current accounting framework. We have an entire category of emissions that's falling through the cracks.
Now let's talk about solutions, because this isn't just a doom and gloom story. Wastewater treatment plants can actually be net energy producers. Anaerobic digestion of sewage sludge produces biogas, primarily methane, that can be captured and used to generate electricity or heat. Some advanced treatment plants in Europe are already energy positive, meaning they produce more energy than they consume. The technology exists. The question is investment and political will.
And that investment question leads us right back to the power structure. Municipal water and sewer utilities across America are chronically underfunded. The American Society of Civil Engineers consistently gives U.S. wastewater infrastructure a D+ grade. Upgrading these systems to capture emissions and generate energy requires billions in capital investment. Where does that money come from? Either ratepayers, meaning higher water and sewer bills for everyday people, or federal funding. And federal infrastructure dollars are currently being fought over in Congress like the last slice of pizza at a budget meeting.
The hidden scandal here is that we've known about these emissions for years. Research going back over a decade has flagged wastewater as an underestimated source of greenhouse gases. But because the sewage system is literally out of sight and out of mind for most people, there's been no political pressure to address it. Nobody runs for office on a platform of fixing the sewers. It's not flashy. It doesn't make for good campaign ads. And so the pollution continues, silently wafting into the atmosphere while we focus on more visible sources.
Let's pivot now to what might seem like an unusual story for an energy show, but stick with us because this connects. A new paper on the AR-14 preprint server describes Lantern, a characterization technology for low-threshold cryogenic detectors used in searches for dark matter and neutrinos. Maya, help us understand why this belongs on an energy news show.
Great question, and the answer reveals something important about how scientific research drives energy innovation. Lantern is a technology designed to characterize ultrasensitive detectors that operate at temperatures near absolute zero. These cryogenic calorimeters are at the cutting edge of particle physics. They're being used to search for dark matter particles and to study neutrinos. The energy range they operate in is between 10 electron volts and 1 kilo-electron volt, which is incredibly low. Detecting signals that small requires extraordinary precision and extremely low noise environments.
And here's the energy connection. The sensor technologies, the cryogenic cooling systems, the ultra-low noise electronics that are being developed for experiments like these have direct applications in energy technology. Superconducting materials used in these detectors are the same class of materials being developed for lossless power transmission, for next-generation MRI machines, and critically, for fusion energy reactors. Every dollar invested in fundamental physics research pays dividends across the technology landscape.
There's a deeper point about scientific infrastructure investment that this paper highlights. The researchers describe the challenge of characterizing detectors in their region of interest, essentially, testing these instruments at the exact energy levels where they need to perform. Conventional radioactive sources produce signals that are too energetic, so they need new calibration techniques. This kind of methodological innovation, figuring out how to test the instruments that test reality, is exactly the kind of foundational work that makes breakthrough technologies possible down the line.
And let me tie this to the political context. Federal funding for basic research in physics has been flat or declining in real terms for over a decade. The Department of Energy's Office of Science, which funds much of this work, has faced budget pressure from administrations of both parties. When we cut funding for basic science, we're not just slowing down the search for dark matter, we're slowing down the development of the next generation of energy technologies. The transistor came from basic quantum mechanics research. Solar cells came from semiconductor physics. The technologies that will define the energy landscape 20 years from now are being born in laboratories like this one.
And to the critics who say this research is esoteric and disconnected from everyday life, the cryogenic technologies being refined here are directly relevant to quantum computing, which is poised to revolutionize everything from grid management to materials science for better batteries. You don't get to pick which basic research turns out to be useful. You invest broadly and let the discoveries compound. That's how technological progress actually works.
Well said. Now let's get to our final story, and this one is a big deal for anyone who pays attention to the decarbonization of industry. CleanTechnica is reporting that Atmos Zero, a U.S. heat pump startup, has partnered with RF McDonald, a legacy boiler supplier, to go directly after fossil fuels in commercial and industrial steam systems. Maya, tell us why this is a five-alarm story for the fossil fuel industry.
Gladly. So here's the landscape. We talk a lot about electrifying cars, electrifying homes, putting solar on rooftops. But there's a massive sector of the economy that has been almost untouched by electrification: industrial process heat. Factories, food processing plants, hospitals, universities, they all need steam and hot water for their operations, and overwhelmingly, they get it from burning natural gas or fuel oil in boilers. Industrial heat accounts for roughly a quarter of all energy-related carbon emissions globally. It is the sleeping giant of climate change.
And the reason it's been so hard to decarbonize is physics. Traditional heat pumps work great for heating buildings to comfortable temperatures, 65, 70 degrees Fahrenheit. But industrial processes often need steam at 250 degrees or higher. Until recently, heat pump technology simply couldn't reach those temperatures efficiently. That's the barrier Atmos Zero is claiming to break through. They're building electric heat pumps designed specifically for commercial and industrial steam generation.
And the partnership with RF McDonald is strategically brilliant. McDonald is a legacy boiler company with deep relationships in the commercial and industrial sector. They've been selling and servicing gas-fired boilers for decades. By partnering with them, Atmos Zero isn't trying to build a sales channel from scratch, they're plugging into an existing network of customers who already trust McDonald for their heating needs. It's a Trojan horse strategy. The fossil fuel industry's own supply chain is being turned against it.
Let's talk about the economics, because this is where the disruption gets real. Natural gas prices are volatile and subject to geopolitical disruption. We saw that dramatically with the European gas crisis in 2022. Electricity prices, particularly when sourced from renewables with long-term power purchase agreements, are stable and predictable. For a facility manager deciding between replacing an aging gas boiler with another gas boiler versus switching to an electric heat pump, the total cost of ownership calculation is starting to favor the electric option, especially when you factor in carbon pricing, which is spreading across more jurisdictions every year.
And there's a regulatory accelerant here. The EPA and state environmental agencies are tightening emission standards for commercial and industrial facilities. Buildings in New York City with gas-fired systems face escalating penalties under Local Law 97. California's Air Resources Board is pushing aggressive electrification mandates. When you combine the regulatory push with the improving economics, the market conditions for commercial heat pump adoption are getting very favorable very quickly.
Now who loses here? Obviously, the natural gas industry, which has been positioning gas as a bridge fuel for decades. The bridge metaphor was always designed to suggest that gas was a temporary step on the way to a clean energy future. But the gas industry has spent billions building out infrastructure, pipelines, processing plants, export terminals, that only makes financial sense if gas demand stays high for decades to come. Technologies like Atmos Zero's industrial heat pump threaten to shorten that bridge considerably.
And let's not forget the geopolitical dimension. U.S. natural gas exports have been a major foreign policy tool, particularly in the context of weaning Europe off Russian gas. If industrial heat demand starts shifting to electricity, which can be generated domestically from renewables, the strategic importance of natural gas exports diminishes. That has implications for pipeline companies, LNG terminal operators, and the entire fossil fuel finance ecosystem that's been betting on continued gas demand growth.
RF McDonald's willingness to partner with Atmos Zero is itself a signal worth reading carefully. Legacy industry players don't typically partner with disruptors unless they see the writing on the wall. McDonald is essentially hedging their bet, maintaining their gas boiler business while positioning themselves to serve the electrification transition. Smart companies adapt. The ones that don't end up like Kodak, Blockbuster, or the coal industry.
And Atmos Zero is just one company. Globally, there's an explosion of high-temperature heat pump development. European companies like Turboden and Alvondo are pushing the boundaries. Japanese manufacturers are advancing industrial heat pump technology. The race is on, and whoever cracks efficient, affordable, high-temperature electric steam generation at scale will unlock one of the largest decarbonization opportunities on the planet.
Alright, let's pull all of this together. Maya, we've covered 5 stories tonight: solar home values, budget e-bikes, sewage emissions, cryogenic detector research, and industrial heat pumps. What's the thread?
The thread is this: the energy transition is no longer a future event. It's happening right now, across every sector of the economy, at every price point, and the evidence is overwhelming. Solar panels are adding tens of thousands of dollars to home values. The market is pricing in the transition. E-bikes are hitting $200 at Walmart. Electrification is reaching mass market price points. Industrial heat pumps are cracking the last bastion of fossil fuel dominance in process heat. Even fundamental physics research is feeding the pipeline of technologies that will power the next generation.
And the sewage story is the dark mirror of that progress. Because while we're making incredible advances in clean energy deployment, we're still not being honest about the full scope of the problem. If our sewage systems are emitting far more greenhouse gases than we're counting, then our climate models are off, our targets may be insufficient, and we're potentially celebrating progress that's less real than we think. That's not a reason for despair, it's a reason for more rigorous honesty in our accounting and more aggressive action.
What strikes me across all these stories is the pattern of incumbents resisting change. Utility monopolies fighting rooftop solar. Auto and oil industries maintaining car dependence. Municipalities underreporting sewage emissions to avoid costly upgrades. The natural gas industry positioning itself as indispensable while startups build the technology to replace it. In every case, the status quo has powerful defenders with deep pockets and political connections.
And in every case, the economics are shifting against the incumbents. Solar is now the cheapest source of new electricity in most of the world. E-bike prices are cratering. Heat pump technology is approaching cost parity with gas boilers. The defenders of the fossil fuel economy are fighting a rearguard action against physics and economics. They can slow the transition. They can make it more painful. But they cannot stop it.
The question is how fast and how fair the transition is. That solar home value study shows a wealth gap in who benefits from the transition. The Walmart e-bike raises questions about safety standards at the budget end. The sewage emissions gap shows that honest accounting matters for setting the right targets. Speed without equity just creates new injustices. And progress without transparency is progress built on sand.
Which brings us to what you can do. If you're a homeowner, the data is clear: solar is one of the best investments you can make, for your wallet and for the planet. If you're a renter or lower income, push your representatives to support community solar programs. If you're a business owner with a gas boiler, start looking at heat pump alternatives now, because the economics are only going to get better and the regulations are only going to get tighter.
And demand honest accounting. From your municipality on sewage emissions. From your utility on where your power comes from. From your elected officials on who's funding their campaigns. The energy transition is a story about technology and economics, yes, but it's also a story about power, transparency, and who gets to shape the future. That's what we cover here on Truth Report.
Every single week, we dig into these stories because the mainstream media won't. They'll give you the press release. We give you the investigation. If you found value in tonight's show, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you don't miss our next episode.
And remember, in a world full of spin, the truth is the most radical thing you can share. I'm Maya Clarity.
And I'm Alex Truth. We'll see you next time on Truth Report. Stay informed. Stay skeptical. And stay powerful.